Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the conversation series.
Because creators are businesses.
What we do is not simple.
Give, the fans everything that they deserve.
Being creative
is like doing a 5,000 piece puzzle.
is something that you can learn and do over and over again.
Always be as authentic as I can be.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the conversation series. I am thrilled today to be sitting down with Dr. Nancy Lough. She is a women's sports scholar and educator. She is currently at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. She is the co-director of Sport Innovated Institute. She's the founding director of their intercollegiate and professional sport management program. I'm so excited. Nancy, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure to be here.
I first want to jump into and hear how you got into sports. What's your sports background here? What started your love for it?
Oh, I think what started my love for it was just wanting to be outside and move. I mean, if we really want to go all the way back, I've always loved sports. So having a hoop outside that I could shoot baskets on was the joy of my life. I'm a happier person when I'm moving and I'm outside, so that just kind of sealed the deal. I was fortunate. I got to play several sports growing up. So I learned how to swim on a swim team, the Tiger Sharks, very proud of that. And I played softball like a lot of girls, but that's pretty much the extent of it before junior high. Junior high, I had the choice of doing gymnastics, cheerleading, basketball and track. I did all of that. High school, I was a four-sport athlete, so volleyball, basketball, track, and one year I took a break from track to play tennis. It was the most fun year of of my sports season because I didn't feel any pressure. And then I went on to run cross country and track at Adams State University in Colorado, the Division II perennial national champions. So I think they're up to 60 at this point in cross country. So very proud of that.
Very cool. Resonate with that a lot. I grew up, it's kind of tennis, volleyball, running. You kind of just like to experience it all. And it was fun growing up, having the experience of being like, I like playing this, but I don't like playing this, and this is my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, I was actually really fortunate because this was I'm the Title IX generation. So my opportunity for a college scholarship was a very new thing. And the year before I got to Adams State, they won the national championship, but that was the beginning, right? So getting the opportunity to participate in four sports in high school was truly a blessing because, like I said, I was that first wave of Title IX beneficiaries.
I want to, go back to an earlier moment in your career, maybe one that doesn't make the formal bio on all the websites, but is there something that a moment that still stays with you today that has shaped the work you do today?
It's a great question. I attribute it to a lot of different moments, I suppose. So the truth is, I wanted more than anything to be a coach. Even when I was in my last few seasons in college, I was more interested in coaching than competing. And I had a phenomenal college coach. He was a multi-decade Olympic coach, Dr. Joe Vigil. And he taught us why we were doing what we were doing. So I fell in love with physiology and understanding how to train the body. And that sparked my coaching career, which was in cross country and track. I tell my folks today, like if I would have had the chance to coach basketball, it probably would have been one of the best tutors for Pat Summitt because I think I could have mimicked her facial expressions as well as anyone. So I think I would have had a very different career. Some of the things early on that influenced me were the fact that I had very few, if any, women coaches. And like I said, I was Title IX beneficiary. So while I was an undergrad, I was hearing this message that man, if I was a woman, I would have a job in coaching in a heartbeat. That's what I was hearing because they were adding women's sports, right? So this was the beginning of the NCAA taking over basically for the AIAW, kicking them out, so taking over women's sport, right? The early 80s. And so there was some truth to that. They were adding women's sport. But the other side of that truth was they were firing women coaches and they were replacing them with male coaches. That's one of those stories a lot of people don't understand. They're like, how do we go from 90% of the coaches of women's sport in the 70s to like 40% now? It just doesn't add up. And we've had more women participate in sport in the last several decades than, ever. And the truth of the matter is that those who were in charge of college sport back then were willing to let go of the women that had the expertise and replace them with men because they felt men always had a leg up on coaching.
Yeah.
So, on the one hand, I was excited because I felt like, okay, I'm going to get a job coaching, and I did. I was very fortunate. I don't dispute that there was opportunity.
Yeah.
But it was pretty quick that I realized that opportunity, that glass ceiling was very low. I was going to be an assistant coach forever and always, even now. And that's predominantly if I was in a sport that's combined, men and women typically are combined in track and field and cross country, unless there's just a women's program, right? And so it became really clear that to be a head coach of a combined program was not likely in the cards for me in my career, right? In the time frame that I would be a coach. Since then, in the last 5 or so years, it hasn't been very long. We do have, I believe, 4 women who are head coaches of combined Division I programs,
Yeah.
which is amazing. And I'm so very proud of that. But I wasn't willing to wait that long. I also wasn't willing to tolerate the sexual harassment and abuse that was going on. So one of the programs where I was an assistant coach, there were things happening to my athletes. And when I became aware of it, and we went to talk to the athletic director about it, and the athletic director, quite frankly, looked us straight in the face and said, there's nothing that's going to happen to your coach. All that's going to happen is you all will be embarrassed if you continue to make this known. So I suggest you just forget about it. And, that was something that I just couldn't swallow. That was the moral line that I was not willing to accept. So that's when I changed my career. And that's actually when I went on and got my doctoral degree and started researching women's sport. The sad end of that story is that coach remained at that university for 10 years. So I'm quite certain that continued, under that athletic director and others after him. So, that's the era that I grew up in. And many women will say, yeah, they've experienced similar things, either as an athlete or as a coach. So, a lot has informed what I do now. And interestingly, when I started my doctoral degree, it was also a super exciting time because this was when Nike first invested in the U.S. women's national soccer team.
Yeah.
And this was when they paid for them to go on a world tour, basically, to get the experience they needed to compete in the World Cup. And that just caught my eye. And I thought, oh, well, okay, there's the answer. If sponsorship, was provided for women's sport, then we would just all of a sudden be on parallel with men. And this was the mid 90s, right? So I saw sport marketing as the answer to elevating women's sport to the level that it deserved. Of course, like I said, this was mid 90s. So here we are 30 years later, and everyone's kind of getting it. I think I can say that I was right.
Yeah.
But it's been a long time coming, and it's been a long time of evolution getting to this point of helping to create that value and that perception and the investment.
And you were just saying, like, Nike and investing in that team is a massive, point in that evolution. You've studied women as sports consumers. You've written a book on sports marketing research. How can you even put into words how far we have come in the last 30 years, 20 years, 10 years?
That's, yeah, to actually measure how far we've come is, it's actually a fun thing to think about because in terms of evolution, the growth in particular, I would say in the last, well, since COVID. The interesting thing is that during COVID, working with my research team, a bunch of other scholars like myself who absolutely love women's sports, study it from multiple perspectives, we were really worried. We were very worried that all the progress that had been made leading up to COVID was going to destroy the momentum. And that's what we were talking about, is what's going to happen. And the opposite happened. So during COVID, that's when the NWSL had their 400% increase in viewership, right? Which was crazy because they were on Twitch. But what that did, and same thing with the WNBA and the wobble, right, that they were in. Now, part of that's because the mainstream sport industry was trying to figure out what to do, and they were in a pickle. Everybody was. But the other thing that was so interesting and that we pointed out in the paper is the fact that for decades, those of us who are fans of women's sport had to become adept at finding it, right? And literally finding it because the media didn't cover it. And if they covered it, they didn't do it well. And so the interesting thing was once COVID came, we knew how to find it. We knew where it was, and we knew how to let everybody else know how to find it, right? And that started building in the bubble, right? In the COVID era, more and more interest, and new viewers came that were like, whoa, the quality of this is really great. And people got excited, right? So the fun part of all of that is the evolution just was completely opposite what we were fearing, right? So without question, that is what I would call the tipping point in a lot of ways. Everyone wants to point to Caitlin now and say that she's a tipping point. There's no doubt that Caitlin and what has happened in her career already has been a very significant point in the evolution of, I would say, fandom, right? Bringing new people that weren't previously fans, bringing them into the fold, which is wonderful because, the thing that I'm always harping on people to understand is for the longest time, the perception was the only fans of women's sport are women. And the reality of that is it's 50% male. It's 50% male, right? Pick a sport, any sport. And I don't say that to try to, make it so that gives it some sort of credibility.
Yeah.
I say that to dispute this perspective that, it's only reserved for one group of people, which unfortunately has always been kind of, from the marketing standpoint, a monolith. Like they talk about women as women, like we're all the same, instead of understanding like the complexity of the women's market. Same is true with men, right? The complexity of men who are women's sport fans. It deserves attention. But if you look at the NFL, it's 45% women, right? And so it's not really all that different now. We have a very broad and diverse representation of fans interested in women's sport. And that's probably the thing that is changing it the most is now we have sponsors investing that are financial firms, that are tech firms, that are auto firms, that are all of these categories, insurance, that we used to try like crazy to help them understand, like women are making these decisions. Women make 80% of all household decisions, but that just wouldn't get through to them. For some reason, they think it has to be, that market isn't viable for them. Well, that has changed, right? That has changed. So there's a number of different things that have happened over time, but without question, getting media coverage is very, very significant. Social media. I mean, the truth of the matter is social media is the biggest disruption. because the athletes can reach their fans, because the fans can create content and reach the athletes. To some degree, they've taken out the need for some of the marketing companies that were, quite frankly, doing a lousy job when it came to women. I will always say that Serena has far more marketing potential than was ever realized. Now she's realizing more and more of that now, but because she was a Black woman, right? Because she represented a group that was not highly represented in her sport, because she came from a culture that, again, the traditional marketing machines didn't really know how to market, right? So, we can look at her as a case study of phenomenal talent, phenomenal athleticism, and phenomenal missed opportunity. Nothing to her agent. Her agent's amazing, but it's the companies, the brands, the folks that are the gatekeepers, that just couldn't see the vision.
Absolutely. And what I've loved is we've seen the growth of PWHL now, which is amazing. We've seen the growth of women's soccer, WNBA, all of these things are growing. More cities are getting teams, which is great to see. As you've gone and done this studying and had your eyes out on all this growth, has there been a sponsorship opportunity, a brand collaboration happening between these teams, whether it's big or small, that you said that's impactful, they've done this right, they know they are listening to what their audience is wanting?
Ally Financial has not only invested, which is super important, but they have created messaging around this. And they have even issued a challenge to other brands. And in their challenge, they said, we believe that if brands invested the same amount, right, just the same amount, in women's sport as they invest in men's. Now, obviously, they're not asking companies to double it, so that means they would have to cut some of their sponsorship money allocated to men's sport to invest in women's sport. But the upside being there's a bigger return on investment on the women's side, which is really true because the value has yet to be realized. Versus, you look at the men's side of the equation, it's very cluttered. How do you break through? How do you break through in the men's market? It's pretty tough. But at the same time, we all understand that, the big brands feel like they can't abandon men's sport. Like they have to be there. They have to compete. I get that. So they have allocated 50% of their sponsorship dollars to women's sport and 50% to men's sport. And then they've continued to elevate that challenge by talking about it, right? Putting it into their messaging, their sponsorship messaging. That is a game changer. And part of what they've done in that process is also called out the need for the media to be a part of this equation. I've argued for decades, the media has always said, we cover what people are interested in. And so that's why you see the shirts that say, everyone watches women's sport, because that's changing that narrative, right? That narrative was, no one's watching, no one's interested. And that narrative was false. Yeah. So, this is a beautiful time with shirts, everyone wearing shirts that actually say, everyone's watching women's sport. And, the truth is they're not making that up. But if the media makes it impossible to find, they are intentionally or unintentionally diminishing the value, suppressing the economic value proposition, which doesn't make any sense to those of us that know that everybody's looking for a good return on investment and economic growth. So that's where it's really hard to untangle what is just simply sexist practice, sexist attitudes. Because at the end of the day, all of them want to do the same thing. They want to make more money. And, when you keep pointing to the growth that's happening in women's sport, it's just, there's no longer a good argument to be made for not investing in women's sport, right? That argument isn't working anymore. I've got tons of anecdotes, but one fun one was a friend in Minnesota. I have friends at University of Minnesota, and Um, a big dollar person with lots of capital said, should I invest? Like, should I buy an NWSL team? They're like 2 million. I don't know. Like, would I get my money back? And you look at that and you're like, dude, if you had invested your 2 million, I can't even tell you what we can do the math, but I think, Angel City obviously is the high mark, right? But the return on investment for selling an NWSL team is skyrocketed, right? Our own owner of the Aces, Mark Davis, he bought that team for $2 million. 2 million. It's a 700% return if he were to sell right now, right? So it's really hard to make the case that it isn't good business at this point.
I think going back to what you were saying as well, and just the viewership, what's been interesting to see now is that there are different ways that people are able to watch all of these different women's sports. And even now you're seeing things like Netflix is picking up. I just watched the trailer yesterday for F1 Academy. F1 is growing massively here in the United States, but F1 Academy showing all these women who are trying to get into positions of F1. I'm so excited to watch this because we don't have eyes on this viewership because we only have eyes on the big F1. So it's exciting to see all these different documentaries, shows, and other opportunities we can to bring people in to learn more is really making an impact as well and bringing people into the sport as well.
100%. I haven't seen that teaser, so I'm excited to find that myself, And I think that's a great example. If you think about another major game changer being NIL. I think so many people believe that this was just for football players and men's basketball players. And the truth of the matter is we have seen celebrity women college athletes evolve out of this process, right? We have names now of young women who are rookies that people want to tune in. Just the other day, I wanted to tune in because Haley Van Lith is playing, she's starting as a rookie. Like, holy cow. Like, and I've watched this young woman's career at 3 different colleges. We didn't used to have that. And even if we followed the athletes, we didn't see them with the same, I guess, broader lens that we do now because of name, image, likeness and what they're able to do with their branding. So that's been a huge game changer. And it's changed in the WNBA in some interesting ways too, right? Because we've got a lot of really great veteran athletes who didn't benefit from NIL. So there's going to be some tension there. But nonetheless, you're right. Like being able to see the evolution of women athletes from when they're young and to what they're, being able to follow them throughout their whole career. Like the PWHL, you mentioned that. I just can't even imagine how exciting these things have to be for young girls, for moms, and even dads, I mean, and boys, because, a lot of fans will tell you, my son wears the jersey, right, of this female athlete because she's amazing, not because she's female or not, she's just amazing. So he wants her jersey and he wants to go watch her play, whether it's the PWHL, the NWHL, NWSL, or the WNBA, or whatever it may be. That's a game changer. These young people today, these kids, they don't have that gender construct of like only boys play sports. In fact, again, anecdotally, I've heard from some moms who their daughters are like, "Oh, men play hockey? I didn't know that." Or, that's interesting. Men play basketball? Like, yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And now we got flag football coming, which is just going to open up so much more because American football is such a phenomenon in this country. It's still, if you ask me, America's game, so to allow girls the opportunity to learn how to play the game is only going to drive their fandom, right? And it's only going to drive the fandom of a lot of people to understand football better. And quite honestly, I'm looking forward to it because I think it's going to be a more fun game to watch in a lot of ways, right? So
I loved this year the PWHL went on their tour. I think it was like 12 stops. They even stopped here in Raleigh, but what I love seeing is that each stop that they made along the way in all these different cities that might not even have a PWHL team now, they had full arenas. They had full arenas of people that came out to watch these two teams play each other. I thought that was a beautiful sight to see, and it just definitely shows the growth of one hockey across, because it is very much not a United States, never has really been. It's been a massive Canadian sport, but the growth here, but just of women's hockey across the board, people are falling in love with it, and I love to see that growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm from Colorado originally and grew up a sport fan, grew up watching the Broncos. I was there for the very first Rockies game, and unfortunately, I left right when the Avalanche were getting started as a hockey team, right? But it's always been a mystery to me why we didn't have a presence of women's professional sport, because we had such good college sport. When I was there, CU women's basketball was one of the best teams in the country. So, now they are going to have an NWSL team that's happening. But I know when they had the PWHL in Denver, they sold out, like sold out. So that's the fun part, is this pent up demand, quite honestly, right? And gosh, the Valkyries, they sold 10,000 season tickets before they even stepped on the court, right? Setting a new record. It's just the excitement,
Yeah.
It's very, very clear that there is a demand, an appetite that isn't going away.
Yeah.
It's super exciting.
As we've been talking about the economic value of women's sports, is there a compelling data point that you wish every sponsor or executive knew?
Sure, multiple compelling data
Yeah.
points. I mean, I'm going to give a shout out to Caroline Fitzgerald. So she does the podcast on the business case for women's sport, and now I think weekly she's doing a 5 point, 5 data points you need to pay attention to. And I love it because every single one of them matters, right? Asia's shoe this week selling out in less than 5 minutes. I mean, granted that Nike wanted to make that happen, but it wasn't hard for them to make that happen, right? It just was quick. The number of viewers, right? I can't remember the exact number of viewers for one of the events that was just like yet another record. I know the game Indiana and their first, preseason game, the Indiana Fever, that was like the top 3 preseason game of all time NBA, WNBA period, right? There were only 2 NBA teams that even ever in the history, which is 75 or 70 some odd years now, eclipsed that number. So, those data points are accumulating. I would love to say like there's one data point,
Yeah.
but the reality is it's an avalanche, right? It's already so many data points that we don't have to point to one anymore. It used to be that we had to point to one, like, oh, well, this was a sellout, right? I mean, I could point to, oh, great, the NCAA women's basketball tournament now finally gets to call themselves March Madness, right?
Yeah.
Well, that was a response, right? And a very small one in my mind, a response to a bigger challenge that came their way, right? Because of how they had been treating women for so many years, and were allowed to do it because there was no way to bring attention to it. So, that's where it keeps coming back to the power of social media.
Yeah.
That might be the thing to point to, not necessarily as a data point, but we do now have metrics in the forms of, followers, engagement, all of the different ways that we now can monetize, what women athletes value really is, what women's sport properties are really worth. Taking it out of the hands of mainstream traditional media, that is probably the biggest game changer.
I will say, as you're talking about the women in March Madness, I think it's been a few years now, but it was really highlighted on social media that they showed off the differences in the men's training and the facilities at March Madness compared to what the women's looked like. And it being posted on social media brought a lot of awareness to the fact of same sport, same environment, same brackets and everything. But this is the level of difference between what the women and men have.
Yeah, Sedona Prince, University of Oregon, at the time. She did open the eyes to a problem, and that's again where I go back to whether it's intentional or unintentional, the sexist attitudes around women's sport, right? That, oh, all the women need are these weight racks. That's all they had is a few weight racks, and the men had an entire weight room with everything you could possibly want. And it just was so glaring how they did not view the women athletes at the NCAA Division I championships as the athletes that clearly they were. And their entire job, the truth of the matter, what the NCAA does is they hold championship events. That's the biggest part of what they do. And this is what you did to set it up for men versus women. The result of that, the Kaplan report, that was another really important. It didn't get the attention that it deserved, but it woke up a lot of people in ways that they needed to be shaken to wake up. And by that, I mean the leadership of the NCAA.
Title IX, you were talking about this beforehand. You grew up, you were playing sports during this time. You've consulted now on Title IX issues across multiple states. Is there something worse people are still misinterpreting or under leveraging Title IX in 2025 today?
That's an interesting question. I think what people are missing is that Title IX could go away.
Mm.
We have said this forever. All of us who are advocates for gender equity and Title IX have faced many challenges. So back in 2001, President then George W. Bush spent a year inquiring into Title IX and holding town halls and, in essence, looking to eliminate it.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen. But, it took a lot of effort on the parts of those who were advocates for gender equity and Title IX to make the case for why we still needed it and why it mattered. And I think seeing Roe v. Wade overturned should have been a wake-up call, because it's a law, but laws can be changed.
Yeah.
And with where college sport is heading, which no one knows, with the litigation that's going on, there's real concern for what Title IX will look like if it continues, or if it'll be completely dismantled.
Yeah.
So, as much as I would like to paint a brighter picture, this is the political era we're living in. The thing that I love most about Title IX is the opportunity that it has created.
Right.
And there is no doubt in my mind that what's happening in women's sport today is because of all of that opportunity. All the girls who got to play sport, who are now women, who now coach, who now have daughters.
Yeah.
I love it when girls tell me, oh yeah, my mom, she's the one that took me to basketball games. She was a basketball player, or my mom played tennis, or my mom did this, and my mom still does. That just wasn't the case, right? A few decades ago, because women didn't have that opportunity. My mom didn't get to play sport at all, right? So it is a concern. It's a very real concern. If college sport eliminates a lot of non-revenue, which is not true, it's non-marketed sports is what it is.
Yeah.
That will change things quite a lot. It will change our Olympic teams. I believe it will have an impact on high school sport. The youth sport system we have today is so elitist because it's so expensive.
Yeah.
I hear parents complain about it all the time, the time commitment, the money commitment that it takes for their kids to play sport. It's unacceptable, quite honestly,
Yeah.
and it's unfair. Now, Title IX doesn't cover that, right? Title IX only covers educational institutions. So, our sports still offered in schools? Absolutely, right? Will that continue? I don't know,
Yeah.
right? I don't know. And I am really, I'm heartened by the advocates, the people who are working so hard, mostly behind the scenes,
Yeah.
to ensure that the things that we've fought for all these years will remain. But the truth is, your generation and the generations behind you have got to take up these mantles and do it at a much earlier time in your lives. I don't know that you all have had to fight for stuff. I feel like my whole career has been fighting for stuff. I mean, in high school, myself and a teammate, we got girls' letter jackets for the first time. There was no such thing, prior to that. And we started getting letters because we were athletes. We wanted our own letter jackets. I mean, that seems trivial, but it's not trivial.
Yeah.
Right. And that was high school, so where there is injustice, it takes people who care and are willing to invest their time and their effort and their energy into educating and just being involved, right? So I have faith that we're beginning to understand the power of community and the need that we have for one another. So hopefully that's where we're headed instead of this division and this divisiveness, right? It's like we have so much in this country. We have more than we need. Everyone has more than they need. Obviously, there's people in poverty. I'm not saying they have more than they need, but if we all shared, if we all cared,
Yeah.
we can make it a great place for everybody, right? There's not a finite opportunity on playing sport. There just never should be. There just shouldn't be, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I that's a tough one right now.
And you've been a professor for some years now. You've gotten to mentor quite a few people, quite a group of people. Is there something your students have taught you recently that's kind of put you back and said, "All right, I needed to hear this."
Oh, I love learning from my students. I do. It's great. One of the funniest ones I've learned recently is that people watch podcasts. I didn't know that. I
Yeah.
only listen to them. I listen to them in the car. I listen to them when I'm working out, but like apparently people watch podcasts. That was
Yeah.
news to me. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, they teach me a lot of things that really make me happy, because they remind me that I even can have entrenched beliefs that come from my history, right? So that part is very, very encouraging. I trying to think of something significant. I think the most significant thing I could point to again is those who have shared, and I do have students who have kids, because I teach grad level, and I have been teaching for a long time, so I know people that have had entire careers, right? But their kids, the kids growing up, are not coming with this gender-based mentality of what an athlete is, right? When they put a team together, they expect to have girls on their team that are just as good as the boys. They don't see it differently, that they're wearing the jerseys of women and guys and just the best athletes, and that their perception is not tainted by like what we grew up with or I grew up with, that whole idea of like throws like a girl. It's that narrative has been changed. You want
Yeah.
to see what a girl throws like? Get behind the plate and come watch a woman throw a softball. Like,
Yeah.
good luck, right? The Major League Baseball players that can't hit that pitch. So, that's redefined. And absolutely love that. I absolutely love that.
It's my favorite videos whenever I come across them of uh, softball girls pitching
Mhm.
against baseball guys and them try to swing, and it's my favorite videos to watch and them just get cooked.
Yeah. Well, so another fun game changer, and I'm going to throw this out because you're in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Um, our friends, the Savannah Bananas, I think they need a couple women on that team.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, why? There's absolutely no reason why they couldn't have women on that team. Women are playing baseball. Major League Baseball is investing in softball, but they're also, there's efforts to get more and more women in baseball. So the Savannah Bananas could change the game right there. Like, let's
Yeah.
get some women on that team.
They've been making waves I mean, they've been playing in football arenas and stuff. It's been incredible to watch them grow and just absolutely boom in the last, but I think there's, like you said, there's extreme growth that they can have there in women's too, just how much they're catching on.
Yeah, I mean, because the reality is there's no, in Major League Baseball to get a woman drafted and play in the league would be really difficult, right? But there is no rationale for that with the Savannah Bananas. They're creating their own competitive field. So let's do this. Maybe they need to field an entire women's team to play against, that
I
could
was
be
just about to
fun
say
too.
they keep like finding different teams, the party animals and all this, that they could have their own women's team that just goes out too, and I think that'd be a really fun opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but that's those are the mindsets of like, let's just do it different. And that's what I love about the Savannah Bananas. I teach an innovation class.
Yeah.
Let's just do it different. So thinking about that, another place that would tell me that we really made some change is we are seeing now companies that are building, creating gear for women. So women's hockey masks, women's catcher's masks, women's gloves, women's, everything women need. Can't believe it was 2024 before Nike decided to make a cleat for a woman's foot. That's just inexcusable. It is. Nike leads, and I could say the same thing to Adidas or any other company, Under Armour, I don't care. I'm not picking on anybody other than the fact that they all failed women for so long. And the same can be said of all the other athletic companies that have not created gear for women. They just have done the shrink and pink thing. And that's just ludicrous. It's a catcher's mask. It's a helmet. Women don't have the same heads. I guess that could be an indicator. When I can actually find a hat that fits my head, I'll know
There
that
you go.
we've arrived. But yeah, no, and so in all seriousness, research on women's physiology, right? And we're finally getting some movement on research around ACL tears in hockey or soccer in particular, but for women, that has been a problem for decades, right? And it's gone ignored, and the research continues to be mostly men that they study, and then they just say, well, this can be applied to a woman, and it's just not true. So, when we see research, abundant research that is helping us to understand how we can help women athletes to have longer careers, to be healthier, to perform at their optimal level, that'll be a real indication that, again, we have arrived.
Nancy, my last question for you as a curriculum architect and as someone who's been in this field for many years, is there a required reading or a must experience that someone who is a student coming up in sports education should go read, should go watch? What should it be?
That's a really good question. That is a very good question.
I'm building out my reading list.
Well, I guess I could push my book, right? Like,
Yeah.
read the book. Well, there's some truth to that. So in 19, we published the handbook. I'm looking at it right now on the business of women's sport. First of its kind, and it's a broad perspective, right, on all aspects of women's sport that a lot of it has to do with the history and understanding how we got where we are and what we've overcome. I would say the biggest shift I've made in the last very recent years is the shift from the mentality of gender equity somewhat as a cause and as the morally right thing to do,
Yep.
to the perspective that it is an economic imperative. That is the biggest shift that I had to make and didn't even realize it, right? For all of these years, we have sold women's sport on the idea that it's the morally right thing to do, that it's good for so many reasons. And the truth of the matter, in this capitalistic country we live in, it's a good economic and opportunity, and we all win when that investment comes our way. So the future, the next book that I write will be about that, like how do we keep this going and what does it look like in the future? And I can tell you, Pink It and Shrink It is something that I really hope is part of our history and not part of our future.
Absolutely agree. Nancy, I can't thank you enough for joining me today and sitting down and letting me go through your past and everything that you've been working on for the last 30 years. I so appreciate it.
I appreciate it with you. It's been a lot of fun, both the journey and this conversation. So.
Yeah. You guys, I'm going to have all of Nancy's socials down below so you can go give her a follow. Stay tuned with everything that she's working on, including a link to her book that she was just referencing. But as always, I will see you guys back here next time. Bye, y'all.